This is The Camp with Zach Heilprin and the Athletics' Jesse Temple.
Yes, welcome into The Camp. I'm Zach Heilprin. That's the Athletics' Jesse Temple. Badgers are on their bye week, but still some things to talk about, Jesse. I want to get into it being 4 games into the season, so we're a third of the way through the regular season. Maybe give some grades, maybe give some MVPs, who's been the most impressive player, some surprises, maybe some disappointments as well. We'll get to that in a little bit, but there are a couple other topics I wanted to hit on before we get to that. And then I think we'll start with the thing that was kind of blowing up yesterday. A lot of people upset about it. The Rutgers game next week, October 7th, going to be kicking off at 11 a.m. That's never an ideal thing, I think, for fans. For us as reporters, we kind of like it because it doesn't end up taking our entire day away. But it's also going to be on Peacock. And there were some people with strong reactions to having to pay for Peacock to watch this game. And I get it. I do. But one person said that streaming will be the death of sports. Do you agree? Is that an overreaction or no?
Well, that person may believe so. I don't believe that's the case. If sports are going to be aired somewhere, people will find it. I get that it's annoying. It'd be annoying for me too. If you pay for cable, if you're still out there and actually do that, or YouTube TV or whatever, and you're paying however much money a month, then you've got to go find this other thing and spend money to watch here's the other thing. You really have to be a true fan to want to spend the money to watch an 11 a.m. game against Rutgers. But if you're watching this podcast, you're probably one of those true fans. Well, I get it. It's annoying. But also, this is part of the package. NBC is involved now in broadcasting Big Ten football, and one of their offshoots is Peacock. This is how it is. Side note, I unintentionally have Peacock. My wife likes The Office and a bunch of other stuff, and now that it's over there on Peacock, I just ended up getting it. So I guess that's a win for me, except for the money you have to pay each month for Peacock. But
it's $5.99 a month. Again, people, I think it's more. I don't think it's about the money. I think it's about the principle of it for some people, like having already paid for your cable package and then having to do this on top. I also have Peacock. Quite literally, I think I have every streaming service, and that has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with my wife. We don't have cable. We may share a password with somebody to get ESPN, but we don't have cable. We have Hulu, we have Netflix, we have Paramount Plus, we have Peacock, we have Disney, we have Apple TV. Like, we have them all. So it's not a huge deal for me. But if I wasn't married, I probably would not have Peacock. So I can understand where people are coming from. But they're paying $1 billion per year to the Big Ten to do this. And people's like, who's making these decisions? Well, the people that paid $1 billion to broadcast Big Ten games, that's who's paying it. And the people are like, well, all this money going to Big Ten execs. I'm like, well, no, the money's coming to coming to the schools, and then they're pumping that back into the athletic department, and it's trying to improve the product on the field, on the court, on the ice, whatever it is. I understand that you don't like it, and you don't want it, but that's kind of what's helping Wisconsin do some of these things financially that maybe they wouldn't have been able to do in the past. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. But if you don't want to get it, don't get it. If you want to go use certain sites that allow you to watch it without paying for it, go do it. I don't care. But this is what it's going to be. And if Wisconsin doesn't end up having the season it wants, maybe some of those games later on are also going to end up on Peacock as well, because they have the ability to flex games later on. Now, this one was kind of always zoned for Peacock, and so a lot of the outrage probably could have just been thrown around in August when this was originally, I think, thrown out there. But it is what it is. Wisconsin will play on Peacock, and people that want to watch it. And if not, I had at least a couple people say that, all right, well, I'm going to end up going to the game instead because I don't want to get Peacock. Wisconsin be like, thank you. We'll take that. We'll take your hard-earned money to come and watch a game that you won't pay $6 to watch on TV. That's fine. They'll be all right with that too. But it's unfortunate, I think, but it's also where the world is. And I kind of point this back to cable, when all these games, and there weren't nearly as many games on TV because the NCAA had the oversight to decide, the money that was coming in, games were going to be on TV, and now it's all up at the conferences. But when some of these games started going to ESPN and going to other places that were not free, like they had been free for so long and no longer free, I'm sure there was similar outrage, but it is what it is. We'll see. I don't think it's getting better. It's probably just going to get worse. That said, moving on here to a few other topics. Chez Mellusi. When we talked the other day, it felt like that we had seen the end of Chez Mellusi, and I just hadn't thought enough about it. And he never redshirted. So he played 4 years. This is his 5th year, but this could be his redshirt year. Like, this was supposed to be his COVID year, right? Because he was in college in 2020 and everyone got a free year, and this was going to be his COVID year, but he played in 4 games. It allows him to have the ability to redshirt this year and then use his COVID year next year as a 6th year guy. What are the chances that you actually think that happens?
I don't know. It's hard to speculate on something without actually having a chance to talk to him, because what it all comes down to is what he would want to do with his life. Plenty of people, college athletes that we cover, they go through their careers, and they, especially with the COVID year and the way things have happened since 2020, there is another option on the table that wouldn't have existed before then, and they just want to move on with their life. And with Chez's situation, he's been through so much, especially the last 3 seasons, especially since he came to Wisconsin. He suffered the torn ACL, which sidelined him for the rest of the 2021 season. Obviously got hurt last year, and this was supposed to be that year where he and Braylon could show what they could do. It's really hard to say. Does a guy who's already 5 years deep into college want to come back for his 6th year? Now, I guess the alternative thought process here is his end game in a perfect world would be to go to the NFL. And if you want to showcase your talent, you got to put it more on film. And so that's a possibility. I'm sure Wisconsin would welcome him with open arms, given the running back situation that they have. Obviously, they've got 3 committed prospects that are very talented, but they're going to be true freshmen next season. And you'd love to have a 6th-year senior that you could rely on. Ultimately, though, I go back to, it all comes down to what Chez wants to do. And I have to imagine at this point, probably not in that phase yet where you're ready to think about that, because it was as we talked about on the last show, it was so jarring and so quick. And there's going to be a mourning period about the loss of all this time you put into to have this season. And now it's gone. If there is a silver lining, it is that he at least has the option to make this decision, but we'll have to see what he wants to do.
It has to be difficult, though, to lose all this time and all these in these rehabs these last couple of years, and now having to go through it again. Mentally, it has to be taxing. But if his end goal is the NFL, I don't think you can just say, all right, I'm going to go at this point. Has he played enough football? Has he showed enough for scouts to see it? Maybe, but he's also put a lot of injuries on tape too. And that is probably another thing that has to be at least thought about when you're an NFL team. We've seen guys in past years be like, oh, this would make a lot of sense for them to come back. They could have another year, they could show more tape, and they could potentially get to the NFL. A guy like John Torchio, who, had the opportunity to come back, but was ready to go. He got a couple tryouts, but it never was something where he was ever going to make an NFL team. Would another year have helped him? I don't know. Probably not. Like, was he going to put better tape than he did last year? I don't think he probably was. It was probably selfish on like the fans and like wanting him to be back and come back, and it makes so much sense. Come back. You're not going to be an NFL player, but I don't think guys feel like that. Some of them just want to move on and get the rest of their life going. So we'll see. I'd put it like 50-50 at this point. Without talking to him, that's a complete guess, but I would say 50-50, and I'd probably lean towards no, but I guess we'll find out. Nathanial Vakos, maybe this would maybe go into some of the grades through the season, but Big Ten Special Teams Player of the Week, 7 for 7 on field goals, including a couple 40-plus yard kicks. The school record, so he's 100% right now. The school record is 90.5% for the season. On pace with 13 games, also opportunity to break the most field goals in a single season. Does he hit either of those?
Boy, I feel good about it. I mean, he's been perfect, but 90+% means if you miss two, you're in big trouble. So who's got the record?
I knew you were going to ask that. So the field goal record for a season is 22. Rich Thompson hit 22 in 1992. He also took 32 that year. So that's also the most field goals attempted in a year. In terms of field goal percentage, Matt Davenport went 90.5%, 19 for 21 in 1998. Rafael Gaglianone, 16 for 18 in 2017 is the second mark. And Rafi is a freshman, 19 for 22 in 2014. I should mention this now because he'll call me out if I don't. Vitaly Pusetsky, number 7 on the list, 16 for 20 in 1999 as the Badgers went to the Rose Bowl and won the Big Ten.
Well, Vakos missed, 3 or 4 kicks all of last year at Ohio. I mean, he's not worse. He's been great. He's been everything they wanted when they got him out of the transfer portal. And the fact that you can rely on him for even that 48-yarder that he hit last weekend, it just shows he's got the total package. So it's still very early in his career at Wisconsin, but it's shaping up to be one of the best kickers Wisconsin's had.
It is. I just wonder, the number to get to that 22 would mean that some of the red zone stuff isn't getting better. Now they are perfect in the red zone. They've been in the red zone 18 times and they've scored 18 times. That's the best mark in all of college football. There's other teams that are at 100%, but no one is, if that's 100%, has been in there 18 times. So that is certainly notable. I think if you're a Wisconsin fan, you hope that he doesn't make it, because then it means you're finishing a few more drives in the red zone, I think. But to be able to call on a guy when it's 40 something yards, that's pretty nice, right? It's pretty nice.
It's a weapon that changes the game, especially as we get into Big Ten play, which we've seen time and time again. These one possession types of games makes all the difference in the world.
One more thing before we get into our quarter poll, or excuse me, our third of the season look at the team. It's September 26th. The Badgers are the only Big Ten West team without a conference loss. Is the division as down as it's ever been? And would you call this season a failure if Wisconsin does not win the West? This past weekend was not good for the Big Ten West outside of Wisconsin, and they were obviously playing another West team. I mean, Minnesota, well, I guess Northwestern had a good weekend too. They erased a 31-10 lead in the second half. Ben Bryant, one-time Wisconsin commit, former Cincinnati quarterback, former Eastern Michigan quarterback, former Cincinnati quarterback, current Northwestern quarterback, erases a lead, throws, I think they threw for over 400 yards. Like, it was just an absolutely ridiculous meltdown by Minnesota. Also very comical, I have to say, for people of a certain mind, and I'm of that mind. Very funny. But also then Iowa goes on the road, and you thought you had seen some bad offense the last couple of years from Iowa. That was the worst offense performance they've had since 2017, when they had an even worse offense performance against Wisconsin in that game that they scored 14 points, but they were both pick sixes by Josh Jackson, Green Bay Packers legend Josh Jackson. My goodness, the West is not good. And I don't know how good Wisconsin is, because I don't think Purdue's any good. We kind of mentioned that before. Still a little up in the air how good Wisconsin is, but the division itself, yikes.
I believe we had this conversation last week, and this is probably going to be a weekly talking point about whether my opinion had changed on Wisconsin being the team to beat in the West. And at the time I said, I haven't changed my opinion at all. I was the only team that hasn't lost a game, and Minnesota was the only team other than Wisconsin that they had a winning record in at all. Like, the division sucks. Let's just call it what it is. So given that I didn't think the West would be all that good to begin with. It's somehow worse. And it's gotten to the point where I probably would say you'd have to consider it a failure if Wisconsin doesn't win the West, because the teams just aren't very good. And I think the talent is there for Wisconsin. And you can bemoan the inconsistencies offensively, defensively, and there is a lot to bemoan, but that's because you've got high expectations. The talent is there. And the Washington State game, it doesn't look like as bad of a loss with each passing week, because Washington State just beat Oregon State, and Cameron Ward looks like a potential Heisman Trophy candidate. He's getting some receiving votes in the athletics Heisman straw poll. And so it's just, I I don't know how you could say if some other team wins the West, that would be a significant flaw for Wisconsin this year.
Where's Vakos in the Heisman straw poll?
Didn't receive any votes, but we're
What the
only
hell?
4 games into the season.
What the hell, man? What the hell? The thing about the Big Ten West is, and I mentioned Iowa, their schedule the rest of the way outside of coming to Wisconsin, there's nobody there. They host Michigan State, they host Purdue, they obviously come to Wisconsin on October 14th, but then they get Minnesota at home. They go to Northwestern. I think Northwestern maybe that was their one shot this year on Saturday. Maybe they'll jump up and surprise more teams, but that doesn't feel likely. They get Rutgers at home, they get Illinois at home, and then they go to Nebraska. What losses other than Wisconsin on that schedule are you looking at?
I don't know that I necessarily am, but Iowa played its tough one against Penn State. Wisconsin has its tough one against Ohio State. And then you get into that situation where Iowa's going to come to Camp Randall Stadium. And I don't think this is yeah, the West stinks, but I think you win the division with 1 or 2 losses. And so and Wisconsin's going to find itself in a similar position, I think.
Whose schedule do you think is more difficult?
What, Wisconsin's or Iowa's?
Yeah.
Well, now I need to think about the crossover games that Wisconsin has. They got Rutgers on Peacock, obviously. You got Ohio State
and Indiana.
And Indiana at Indiana.
And Iowa's crossover games, Penn State, Rutgers, and Michigan State.
I don't know. I just feel like it's like negligible, and the difference is that Iowa's got to come to Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin's got to play Minnesota at Minnesota in the regular season finale, but I just feel much better about Wisconsin because
that's not the question, right?
Iowa's offense. Well, right, but if Iowa's offense stinks in the way that it does, then how can you have much confidence that they're just going to run the table or lose to Wisconsin but win all the other games?
Did you see how amazing the great Deacon Hill looked like on Saturday night? When you look at the two statistical, if you look at the box score and you see what Cade McNamara did and you see what Deacon Hill did, I don't know if you want to go look that up real quick, but if you see the box score between the two, I think it's pretty clear who you need to start going forward in the rest of the season.
Well, you obviously know the stats by heart, so let me have it.
I don't have it by heart. That's why I wanted you to go look it up. But I know that Deacon Hill completed 50% of his passes, and I know Cade McNamara did not. I know Cade McNamara turned the ball over. I know Deacon Hill did not. I'm just saying. I think if you look at the box score and you see the numbers for one guy and you see the numbers for the other guy, I think it's pretty clear. All right, let's get into some of these. This look at the 4 games into the season, a third of the way through the season, the regular season. Wanted to get into this and ask you some questions, see where your mind is at with this team. Who has been the best player for Wisconsin? Not the MVP, but the best player for Wisconsin through the first 4 games.
The best player, I've got to go with Hunter Wohler. He's got 41 tackles in 4 games. He's averaging 10 plus tackles a game. He had the 2 picks and a sack in the same game, got the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week. I think he's been every bit as good as people hoped he could be when transitioning to this defense. And this is a good segue because I'm writing about him for this week. Had a chance to talk with him one-on-one last week. Like this is who he could have been last year. He started the first game and then he got hurt. And so we basically had to wait an extra year to be the player that most people around the state, I suspect, knew he was capable of this. I think it's Big Ten wide and anybody who's paying attention to Wisconsin beyond that's really seeing how good he is. Because he was so talented coming out of high school. It was kind of, sometimes it doesn't always pan out, but sometimes you can see a guy and be like, all right, that dude is a dude. And when he gets a shot, he's going to be the man. And now he's doing it. So for me, it's the consistency with which he's played that makes me think he's had the best season so far.
You think this is his last season in Wisconsin?
Oh man, I don't think so. But
he hasn't had that good of a season?
Well, it's just he's 4 games into the season. It's so, what would it take for you'd have to feel like you'd be an early round pick, I think. And also as an in-state guy, I think there's an added layer of what it means to play here. And I don't know what it would take for a player like him to be viewed as a first 3-round kind of guy. Let's say he does average 10 tackles a game. I don't know if that automatically guarantees anything. So yeah, it's so early for me to speculate on that. But at this point, I'd be a little bit surprised if he wasn't here for his senior year, but you never know. I mean, Leo Chanel, fantastic junior year, Big Ten defensive player, or was it defensive player of the year, linebacker of the year for sure. He's like, you got to go. So we'll see.
All right. Different than that, best player, MVP.
But what's your answer here?
Well, my best, I mean, it's clear. It's very clear that it's Hunter Wohler. I don't think we need to jump into it even more. Who's been the best player? I think it's been far and away him. He's been the one that's been consistent every single game. He's been there every single game. While, Tanner Mordecai's jumped up and Braylon Allen's jumped up, it's been Hunter Wohler every single game.
Yeah.
So your MVP.
This one is really hard. I don't think I can give it to Wohler because I think the defense as a whole has had some issues, which I imagine we'll get into. Honestly, I'm inclined to go with Tanner Mordecai, which is strange because if you just looked at the box score, you would see, okay, this guy was going to come in here and maybe break records. He's got 2 touchdown passes and 3 interceptions. What the hell, man? But if you watch what he's doing, he's been so steady. He makes such smart decisions. He does have 4 rushing touchdowns, and you can't ignore that. His mobility is a difference maker, and generally he's giving guys opportunities to make plays. And again, he's got the ball in his hands on every snap. So despite the fact that the numbers may not say as much, I think he's been the MVP so far because of what he's been able to do. And I do think this offense is going to continue to get better and better. The storyline the first 3 games was how it wasn't very good in the first half. They just blew the doors open with 3 touchdowns and 3 drives. And Tanner Mordecai was right in the thick of it, obviously, with 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, that game was a lot closer than it needed to be because of their inability to finish in the red zone in the second half. But, and obviously the defense not getting off the field and not being able to stop a anemic Russian attack, or at least a Russian attack that had been anemic coming into the game. But the way they started put Purdue on its heels, and they never recovered. And Tanner Mordecai was obviously a huge part of that. So yeah, MVP for him. I think you could probably say Braylon as well. I mean, the one game that he did not play well or didn't show up, that's unfair. The one game where the statistics don't show, he didn't have a very good game. All right, I'm just going to go there. He just didn't have a very good game against Washington State. The offense in general wasn't clicking. The running game in general wasn't clicking against Washington State, and they lost that game. So his importance to this team and his importance to be able to put the ball and run it, so huge. And it's even bigger now. Like, I think he kind of is going to take on even more of a role. I know we kind of talked about that on Sunday. I don't think you want to overuse him because we see what happens at the end of the year or the past 2 years, but they're so little experience behind him that they're going to have to rely on him for an even greater workload, I think, moving forward.
Right. Braylon, I mean, he would be the other one that I would have thought about because he's got 6 touchdowns. He's averaging over 7 yards a carry, which is kind of amazing when you consider that this hasn't been the year that anybody thought he would have, but a lot of that has to do with the injuries. And you're right, with Chez out, it completely changes the math on what Wisconsin staff has to do. And I wrote about this after the game, but look at what happened the 2 previous seasons when Chez was hurt. Now, there's a little bit different situation because Chez was the starter in Braylon's first year, but Braylon ended up averaging like 23 carries a game over those final 4 games. He carried 29 times in the bowl game. And then when Chez got hurt last year, Braylon averaged about 22 plus carries. And we know Luke Fickell said before, in an ideal world, Braylon carries 18 times for 140 yards. But if you're not giving Braylon the ball, then that presumably means you're giving the ball to Jackson Aker. And while I think he's a very talented player, Braylon and Chez were going to form one of the top tandems in the country at running back. And so it's a delicate balance that this staff has to make. But I do think ultimately what ends up happening is Braylon's got to shoulder a little bit more of the load as long as he can stay healthy. I don't think that means 23 carries, but I do think it's consistently a few more and see what happens.
Problem is he's already dinged up. And
I know. And maybe the bye week is what makes a difference.
Maybe if you're Wisconsin, you have to be hoping that. So we'll see. All right. Continuing on here. Biggest surprise to this point in the season?
Well, we could go any number of ways here. My first thought is Tucker Ashcraft, just because I go back to a surprise is, okay, what did you think things were going to look like when fall camp began? And when fall camp began, well, 2 days before it began, I thought, oh, Jack Eschenbach, Clay Cundiff, Hayden Rucci, there's your top three. And then it was obviously Jack Pugh in there and Riley Nowakowski. And we know that Pugh hasn't been available for personal reasons, and Nowakowski's been hurt. And for a true freshman to come in and do what Ashcraft has done, get the snaps that he's done, I absolutely did not see that coming. So that to me has been probably one of the biggest surprises.
That's up there. I think it's the rotation at corner between Alexander Smith and Nazir Forkarine, because everyone expected Alex to be like their top corner. And the way that they're rotating, and it's not 50-50, but it's a lot more rotation than is happening with Ricardo Hallman, who has played feels like almost every snap on defense. I know it's not, but it feels like he's played nearly every snap on defense to this point, and there's no rotation there with him and somebody else. It's just almost all, between Nazir and Alexander Smith. So that one kind of stands out to me. There's some negative surprises, but I think that goes into the next category, and biggest disappointment. And I don't feel great about doing this, but what's your biggest disappointment to this point?
Well, I want to say defensively, it's tough to pick an individual player for this. Like, I think Kamoi Latu has certainly in the first two games struggled, and given what we thought was possible for him based on last year, that was surprising. But I think it speaks to just the defensive performance in general. And I wrote about this week. It's a small sample size, but it's a large enough sample size that illustrates what's been going on here this season. And they haven't given up a ton of points, but they've given up a ton of yards. And that has to be a concern. I mean, it's in a variety of ways. I know that quarterbacks are throwing the ball a lot on them, but they've given up more passing yards per game than at any point in any season ever. And that may come down, but I think that's notable. There's been missed tackles, missed assignments. And I think Jake Chaney, he was probably one of the better quotes after that Purdue game, because he was just being honest about how disappointed he was in the defensive performance. And he includes himself in that. I sort of assumed, well, this defense has been good for a decade. Mike Tressel's got good credentials. There's a lot of talented players here. They're essentially going to pick up where they left off. And there have been strong moments and good players, but it's taking more time than I thought.
Yeah, for sure. My biggest disappointment to this point is the lack of being clean. We heard Luke Fickell talk about playing clean football. And I thought for the first two games, it kind of did. And they had 7 penalties through the first 2 games. They've got 19 penalties in the last 2 games. That to me is probably unacceptable. And so many of them are not physical mistakes. They're mental mistakes. We saw the guys line up improperly against Georgia Southern. You had how many false starts against Purdue? It was just a really, really tough thing to see. And you would think with the veterans that they have in the places where these are happening, specifically along the offensive line, you would not expect that to be the case. These guys have started a ton of football, and I understand that the clap aspect of this is a little bit different, but that is a huge, huge disappointment to this point. And if you want to extend that a little bit, I think, I thought Jack Nelson would have a better season than he's had to this point. That's not saying that he can't get better. Maybe he's dealing with stuff. I don't know. But the biggest disappointment, like that's an unfair thing just to put on a single guy. Just the lack of straight up being clean. That is a little bit of a surprise. I didn't think that they would have an issue with that. And so you could go biggest surprise, biggest disappointment. I think either with that, biggest disappointment for me.
I
So
think that's fair. I think that's fair because these are some of the same issues that plagued the team when it wasn't very good the last few years. And maybe it speaks to all of this takes a little bit longer than anybody wanted. But I believe it was 6 false start penalties in that game against Purdue, 4 on the offensive line, 2 on special teams, and just can't have that.
no, you can't. And the other penalties in that game, a couple more holding. It wasn't a great day for the offensive line, even though they opened up some nice holes for Braylon, and they kept some great pass protection for Tanner. Like, he was barely touched. How long was he able to stand back there? I know it was a 3-man rush, but like how long was he able to stand back there and look around before he ended up running the ball in for the touchdown? He was back there forever. So there have been a ton of positives along the offensive line this year. There have been. It's just, if I'm asked for biggest disappointment, the penalties are just, I think they would say this, unacceptable to continue to have those issues. All right, some grades. Your grade for the offense to this point.
That's tough. I'm not going to be overly harsh because I think there have been some really good moments. I'm going to go with a B minus, because it's more about consistency. Like, when they are at their very best, man, it's so entertaining. But there's a lot more to give.
Yeah, they're ranked 46 in the country in total offense to this point. They have been pretty balanced. It's 806 yards passing and 904 yards rushing to this point. I think you have to be the other way around. 806 yards rushing, 904 yards passing. That type of balance is exactly what I think a lot of people were hoping that was going to be the case going to the season. Could it have been better? Yes. I'm going to go with B. I'm a little bit fairer grader than you are. I think what we saw against Purdue gives me a lot of hope for the rest of the year, for sure. Because did they click the entire night? Absolutely not. But are they closer to clicking? Yes. Now, how good is Purdue? Irrelevant. If you're getting that type of confidence in yourself, I think it's a good building block. So I'm gonna go with a B. You're great for the defense to this point. Or did you want to give? Sorry, go ahead.
One more thing on the offense. Like, I completely agree with you. I look at it more of what they've put on tape through the first 4 games. Like, I am way more encouraged after watching what they did get against Purdue. But I also think you can't ignore that they were outscored in the first half of the first 3 games and didn't put away 2 teams that absolutely they should be putting their, the pedal to the metal on. But yes, I'm definitely encouraged and think moving forward, they're going to be a lot better.
Great for the defense.
Defensively, it's tough because they haven't given up a ton of points. Obviously, the Washington State game notwithstanding, you give up 30 plus, you're going to be in not a great spot. Didn't help that the offense gave them a touchdown, so I can't put it all on the defense. But I'm going to go with a C. They've been average. Like, they're not a terrible defense. They're just not the dominant defense that we've come to know over these last several years, where you look and they're in the top 5 in a lot of the major statistical categories. They're just kind of average to slightly above average in a lot of these categories. And I think this has been a key talking point among the fan base, that, like, why aren't there more playmakers, or why are they using this type of defense? And it's like the offense. I think it's going to take some time. I don't know how much of this has to do with getting your own personnel in. And, like, I don't know. I mean, I'd love to ask Mike Tressel about this. Just like, what are his thoughts on the way things have gone through the first month of the regular season? I do think it's interesting. And I put this in the story. They've had 6 defensive backs on the field. And I know that one of those plays essentially as a linebacker, but for more snaps than any other team in the country. And it's like 149 snaps, and only 3 other teams have had 100 plus snaps with 6 DBs on the field. So, like, they're definitely doing some really different things, and it's been effective at times. I think they have 4 picks at it when 6 DBs are on the field, but they're also giving up a ton of big plays, and it hasn't been good enough. And the guys are the first people to say the exact same thing.
Yeah, for sure. I think that grade makes sense. Special teams.
Well, Nathanial Vakos, A++, kickoffs, D-. You can't have 3. You can't have 3 kickoffs go out of bounds. You know, in the return game, I can't. I mean, Chimere Dike he's been really good, I think.
Yep.
So I guess, you know, B plus, like they're good elements, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
If you take away, I mean, if you take away the kickoffs, I think they've been pretty good, pretty
Mm-hmm.
good.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously had the one penalty, the lining up incorrectly. I think that was Georgia Southern
Well, they had, let's see, Vinny Anthony had a false start as a gunner.
against Purdue.
But
Am
I
I
mean, even
thinking?
the punting's been, I don't think it's been a significant issue at this point. So I'll
Yeah.
go B plus.
All right. Before the season, we did our season predictions. I guess they're both still possible. I'll remind people of it. Jesse went 10-2. I went one game better than that. I'm not going to actually say the record. Would you like a redo of your prediction? Or are you going to stick with 10-2?
I'm staying with it. Why backtrack now when it's still in play? And I've got a loss to play with. You do not.
I do not. I do not. I think 10-2 is probably more realistic at this point. Maybe even 9-3, just based on what we've seen. I think Ohio State's going to be a very, very tough game. I'm still on record. That's still the bold prediction. That's still my bold prediction for the year. I think we both went there before the year. But yeah, I'll probably lock in 9-3 at this point.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
I'm okay with changing it up. Do you have a bold prediction for the rest of the season other than them beating Ohio State?
I'm gonna stick with that one. And I mean, if Wisconsin puts 11 guys on defense on the field instead of 10, you know, they'll probably have a decent shot.
That was so
So I
pathetic.
don't know.
That was so pathetic. Like it happened back to back plays, and it happened coming out of a timeout.
Yeah, I
This
know.
wasn't like things were so crazy going on. It came out of a timeout. You only had 10 guys out there, and he didn't realize it until it was too late on the next play. So that's very tough. And then I've seen them being like, "Oh yeah, we have a signal if it happens again." How about you just don't, have it happen again?
Right. If it
That's
happens
to
again,
me
everyone should probably be fired because it shouldn't happen one time.
right. Much less two in the biggest moment of your season. I'll be honest. I didn't really have a rooting interest in that game, but it was a fun game to watch. Like just the back and forth of it was really, really fun to watch. But to end that way and then just to get killed on social media with all the images of them missing the defensive lineman of exactly where Ohio State ran the ball, that was amazing. That was amazing. It was a fun late Saturday night because obviously that game played out that way, and then you're able to flip over and watch Minnesota just choke away a win. I mean, just snatching defeat from the jaws of victory there for Minnesota and PJ Fleck was a great way to end the night. It was a great way to end the night. Very funny. And being able to watch football all weekend after getting home from West Lafayette, that was fun. I'm guessing you did not have the same weekend experience, but it was good. And now we get another weekend off. But we'll be out at Monk's in Sun Prairie on Thursday night. It's a big night because obviously the Packers also play. We're obviously the lead into the Packers. Everyone's going to be focusing in on us and then switching their focus to the Packers. Come out to Monk's in Sun Prairie, watch the game. There's Jello shots for every single touchdown that the Packers score. Would have had quite a few, not too many, I should say, this past weekend, but they're still interesting team. So come out and watch it. Come out and see us, and looking forward to that. Jesse, thank you very much.
Thanks, Zach.
All right, there he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.